Okay, do we have questions at all for either speaker? Okay, Alex and then Gordon. Okay.
Actually, I really don't know the answer. Do you know, maybe Mike knows better about this, how you would classify them in terms of health effects. I haven't looked really into those too much.
Alex, the way we look at it, Michael, I think, is the best in the world at doing this kind of stuff because he comes to our lab and he finds so much that we've never noticed before. Gave many examples of that here. But to answer your question directly, you're hitting on a very critical point that's a point of the future. And young people here, think about this for the rest of your careers and do something about it. We're making, because of what humans are doing to the planet, and David and Michael showed many examples, Gordon and I did too, we're creating nanophases now that aren't supposed to be there, quote unquote, not supposed to be there. Spinels, are you kidding me? But they're all over the place. All these things that shouldn't be there, but there they are. Well, the microbial communities in these areas aren't expecting them either, and they're not prepared to deal with these things. Sometimes they're highly toxic to microbes, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're beneficial. But it does change. We do know through metagenomics that the microbial populations now in human-impacted parts of the surface of the Earth are completely changing. The microbial communities are completely changing. And there was a report on NPR the other day that is a study, and I can't remember where the study was, but it's recently published, that's showing that CO2 balance in the global system is being highly modified by these changes in microbial communities. So you're touching on a point of decades of future research. It's really important.
Gordon was next, but...
Oh, yes, okay, go ahead, Gordon.
Mike, it wasn't clear to me if growth of or aggregation of nanoparticles within nanopores was really affected by the nanopore region, because we know that aggregation occurs outside of nanopores as well. So do you have any evidence that aggregation within nanopores is different, a faster, more energetically favorable process within the nanopores than, say, outside of the nanopores?
That is a good point. I think because of the size restriction of a nanopore, I think sometimes the nanoparticle doesn't have another choice, right? There is no, cannot move around. It's really limited size of a pore, and so I think you're forced literally to the aggregation. The other is, of course, the role of water. Because the role of water to isolate a nanoparticle is limited because of the structural ordering of the water. And because it cannot really isolate nanoparticles as the same way as it cannot isolate ions, the nanoparticles tend to aggregate more. This is what I think, but of course, how the structure of water really relates to the mineralogical processes that I observe is somewhere still in the dark. I mean, I talk to molecular modelers, if they can actually model how the structure affects the mineralogical process. Why do I see so many spinel group minerals? And they cannot really give me yet an answer either. I mean, between structure of minerals and structure of water and nucleation or aggregation process, there is still a gap of knowledge we don't really understand now.
Yeah, I just have a comment in regarding. I know it's a nanomineralogy or nanopore, nanoparticles. It's very important, as we heard from Mike's talk. I want to point out in this field and more like a size-dependent or shape-dependent kind of stability and property change, like size changes will affect mineral stability, their reactivity, and even physical property. For example, though the iron-bearing minerals, their magnetic property will change dramatically. So I think that area is the direction we need to go for nanomineralogy. Before we only care about let's say, just like a hematite, okay, only whether big or small, but now we know there are big difference. When size changes, their stability and reactivity changes. And a similar thing for the nanopores at the other side. One is a positive curvature and another is negative curvature. And both curvature affect the chemical property and physical property of the materials.
Yes, I had a question for David. Do you think that this the kind of studies that you are doing will be useful for nutrients and for guiding agriculture? Because agriculture practice could be improved in order to have a better use of nutrients and fertilizers, which is a major question for humankind, for the future.
So just in case not everyone heard that, the question came up about nutrients and how to approach this with nutrients. And I could have given that whole talk on nutrient loadings and excess nutrient loadings. I'm now blanking on her name. She was a PhD student with John Trover, and she's now at the University of Toledo, and Toledo is one of the, sort of at the epicenter of phosphate nutrient loading or excess nutrient loading coming off of the Midwest and coming off of Ohio and moving into the western basin of Lake Erie, which catalyzes these harmful algae blooms. A few years ago, Toledo and the surrounding area, there were 300,000 people who had to stop drinking water because of the harmful algae blooms. And so, but that initial release of phosphate is intimately tied to iron oxides and organic matter interactions within soil aggregates that are coming off of landscapes. And geochemists, mineralogists can interact with farmers and land stewards to say what are best practices for phosphate management or nutrient management, which are all ultimately derived from nanoscale, micrometer scale, and centimeter scale information.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question. So a lot of the techniques that you are describing here, these involve very high-end instrumentation, HRTEM, FIB, synchrotron, and these are not accessible to a lot of folks like me who are at an undergraduate-only institution. We do have a TEM, but it's not that amazing. So what I'm wondering is, how do you have any ideas for sort of first pass screening techniques that you can get either K-12 students involved in, undergrads involved in, citizen science initiatives involved in, because these are a lot of environmental questions. What are some ways that we can do what you're doing but with a broader audience?
So I would say for myself, and this is a response for me personally about trying to find funding to do work and being very much invested in doing synchrotron work, but also recognizing that I need to, in order to survive academically, I need to be able to add in other techniques as well. And there's a suite of bulk techniques. I would say that, so I'm not going to argue against building more synchrotrons because I'm certainly invested in synchrotron science. And in an ideal world, we have money for all the science and not just having to pick and choose what we're going to spend money on. But I can imagine a world where we say, here's $1 billion, let's put a benchtop XRD or a benchtop SEM in every high school classroom. Maybe that's unrealistic. But starting earlier and building up the knowledge base, and so that when they get to college and university, that they understand how these things work. Another idea that I was thinking about actually in this last talk was, so we have a Hitachi environmental SEM that is not much bigger than a desktop computer and is attached to a laptop, and we can take that on the road. We can go down the street to the City of Kent High School and take that into a classroom and do a demonstration. So the Mineralogical Society has the lecture fellowships where we send out a few of our colleagues each year to lecture around the country. We could send out a demonstration and take it on the road to high schools or middle schools. I guarantee that if you went to a 6th grade science teacher who was incredibly underpaid and overworked and said, I'm going to come into your classroom for a day or two and show you what you can do with this benchtop SEM and XRD, I guarantee they're going to want to take the opportunity. You know, and the cost of 2 or 3 benchtop movable SEMs and benchtop diffractometers and take that basically on a road show. I don't know if you could scale that up to every high school in the country, but building that knowledge base early on and showing that there are things that don't require multi-million or multi-billion-dollar instrumentation to younger audiences and to the broader public.
Just a comment, David, I think it's a wonderful idea, but here's the deal. If you were able to introduce this to classrooms, the X-ray companies would be all over you and the classrooms to sell more and more of the instruments. So they would probably support this at some point at the very beginning of this suggestion that you just made. And I think you should pursue that. That would be great.